The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence here on the Hard Rock Empire as we talk all things rock and metal for Sunday, June the 1st. We are into June, believe it or not, and we are ready to talk about the music of May the 9th is on tap. Issue, so hopefully we can get that figured out. But while we are in the process of doing that, joining me in the studio is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. Been a pretty productive week. I'm now caught up on the YouTube Shorts. Pretty excited about that. And am almost finished with my initial watch through of the anime openings from spring of 25. So hopefully I'll get that video pushed out this week as well. So definitely getting a lot of content out there. Kind of wild. I saw on Facebook the other day that last couple days, Avenged Sevenfold's been posting stuff to commemorate what's going to be the 20th anniversary of City of Evil. If you weren't already feeling old, now's a good time to remind yourself that, yeah, you're old. So, yeah, good times.
Yeah, that's definitely a stark reminder, and that's one of those things when you go through on Blabbermouth or whatever it might be, you see these types of things, and it's like, oh, that shouldn't be that long ago. But it is, unfortunately, and that's just kind of the way it goes. So, there will be some really cool things coming out, I'm sure, as a lot of these albums are hitting 20, 25, 30 years. And I'm sure as we get kind of details on those, we'll talk more about those here on the podcast, as we tend to do. There's a lot of really cool sets that we spotlight as we move along. And news headlines today, nothing real heavy in the news headlines, but just a few things we wanted to kind of spotlight to get things started. And this first one was just interesting because this is a band that we have talked about several times on the podcast, and that is the band Triumph, one of Canada's best rock bands, and maybe some news that maybe they're not done. Maybe they're going to continue performing. This article from Blabbermouth was talking a little bit about their documentary that they did back in 2021, Triumph Rock and Roll Machine, where they recorded 3 songs and they re-recorded some songs as there were snippets of them in the movie, and they mentioned those may come out. But later in the article, it does mention that, maybe there is more new music in the future. Of course, they broke up for many, many years, kind of had a falling out between the members, and now it does seem like everybody's kind of on the same page, which is great to see. And I would certainly be down for some new Triumph. Somebody at Frontiers Records or somewhere like that probably ought to get those guys on the phone if they're not already under a contract somewhere. But certainly would be some good news to see Triumph continuing on and making more music.
Yeah, there was a lot in this article. The more you scrolled down, the more it just kind of got crazy as far as how the story was set up. But yeah, they re-recorded those songs as part of kind of a secret show that they did kind of in conjunction with a documentary that was being made by Sam Dunn and Banger Films that ended up coming out in 2021. You kind of go down and it kind of feels like there's like separate stories built into it that kind of go to show you like just how appreciated Triumph is now. Maybe they weren't always held to that same like level, but maybe now they're finally getting more of their kind of just due. But their song Hold On was chosen by the Coalition for Music Education in Canada as the anthem for Music Monday 2025 to raise awareness of music education. They were also talking about working on some sort of futuristic, like hologram-esque live experience. The way they kind of made it sound is that they would have essentially like holographic versions of the original members along with Phil X potentially live and some new members there that can still kind of keep up the touring to kind of turn them into like a 6-piece band, including the holograms. And I guess they were working with the guy who did like the Ronnie James Dio and Frank Zappa hologram stuff. So just kind of wild. And on top of all that, they got the tribute CD coming out. So it's just a lot of Triumph celebration right now.
Which is great to see. Again, they're a band that maybe whether it was, because of their long breakup or because, everybody thinks of Rush typically when you think of, legendary
Canadian power trios.
Yeah. So like Triumph maybe doesn't get the credit they deserve, but, thankfully that seems to be changing over the years. And you mentioned this Triumph CD, this tribute CD. We've talked about it before on the podcast, but a good reminder if you're a fan of the band, That'll be coming out on June the 6th, and I have a feeling we'll be talking about that again when we get to that point. There's just a really fantastic lineup of artists that are going to be doing music. I know we've talked about it before, but there are several tracks that I'm really excited to hear what these tribute versions of them sound like.
Yeah, it should be amazing. And I also mentioned the documentary that came out in 2021, which I've not watched yet, but being done by Sam Dunn and Banger Films, it's bound to be really good. They're the guys who did the original Metal Headbangers Journey documentary, Metal Evolution, that kind of chronicled all the different subgenres of metal. Just if you're a fan of any kind of heavy music, it's worth taking a look at, just because the work that they put into trying to classify so many subgenres and giving examples of each. Just a really fun watch.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely worth checking out. And definitely worth checking out the documentary on Triumph, as well as this tribute CD coming up. But great to see, and like I said, we'll talk more about that CD as it comes forward. And if they do produce any new music, we'll almost certainly talk about it on the podcast as well. A couple other news stories. These are always kind of fun news stories, stories that kind of end up having a happy ending. A story about how Metallica is being credited for saving the life of a family. And basically it comes down to the fact that this family was sitting in their living room, as they always do, knew they had a Metallica concert the next night. So instead of staying up and watching TV late, they decided to go to bed a little bit early. Well, as it turns out, a truck came crashing through their house, would have probably left them in a pretty rough state, to say the least. But fortunately, they weren't in the living room at the time, because they were getting ready for the Metallica show the next day. That was their show at Lane Stadium at the Virginia Tech's campus. But those are always wild stories when you hear, like, oh, well, this person was supposed to be here, but they weren't, and because of that, they're still alive. So this family crediting Metallica for them still being here. It's kind of a wild story.
Yeah, definitely a wild story, and kind of harkens back to kind of the Cliff Burton Metallica story, where he and Kirk Hammett switched bunks on their tour bus, which unfortunately, I mean, either way, it was going to be bad, obviously.
Yeah.
But, it ended up taking the life of Cliff Burton as opposed to anyone else in the band. But again, it just goes to show you just random decisions that seem otherwise non-consequential can have just a huge impact on your life. The article also mentions the Metallica Save My Life film that has been screening in some of the cities that they've been touring to. I saw the trailer to it. It's being directed by Jonas Åkerlund. It kind of seems like it's a film that talks about the experience that Metallica has had on their fans and kind of the community of fans, that people who all over the world. There was a fan in this metal community from Botswana, like just things that you wouldn't expect, places that have been ravaged by war, and what kind of that family, both being a fan of Metallica and being able to kind of commune with other fans of Metallica, what that's meant to a lot of these people. It looked like it'd be pretty cool. And, I think there's always that kind of feeling that the metal fandom is like that. Mm-hmm. I think it kind of gets a bad rap sometimes for being maybe gatekeepy, but I think for the people within it, I think you do kind of see a lot of stories like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think most fandoms, I don't want to say most, but a lot of fandoms are that way. Unfortunately, they only make news when it's somebody doing something really bad or people acting up. And sometimes the good story, the community nature of it doesn't necessarily make headlines, because it's not something that's sexy to report on. But really cool. Definitely be interested in checking that out. And if you check out the Blabbermouth, or the Metal Injection piece, I should say, that I posted in the chat, it also has the remainder of their 2025 and into 2026 tour schedule. Of course, they're wrapping up their U.S. dates coming up at the end of this month now, the end of June. Then they'll be headed to England for a date on July the 5th. And then they'll be headed down under, starting off in Australia, coming up in November. They'll be hitting New Zealand, along with Bahrain, UAE, and then hitting Europe, coming up next May with Gojira and Knock Loose, among a couple of other bands that are kind of popping in here and there. But, I mean, you saw them. I think if any of our listeners haven't seen them, probably need to be on the list to be able to check them out. But looks like a lot of people, a lot of places are going to get to check them out over the next year. So definitely encourage you to do that. One other story, which is kind of one of those ongoing stories that we talk about on the podcast because it is something that is kind of growing uh, in popularity. Is the policy of a lot of bands now to limit cell phone usage? We have talked about bands that just flat out make you lock your cell phones up and you just can't even have them on you. Iron Maiden has basically hasn't taken quite that dramatic of a stance. They're kind of going on the honor system. They're just
strongly encouraging you to not use your phone.
yeah, I think that's probably a good way to phrase it. It is basically them saying, look, if you want to take it out and get a quick picture to remember the night, totally cool. Just don't watch the show through your screen. And this story basically talks about how they were thanking their fans, and by and large, it sounded like their fans did do what they were asked to do and not have their phones out. But it does mention that there were some fans that did have their phones out, and the manager said that he wishes them nothing but a very sore arm.
Pretty harmless.
Yeah, I think honestly, as far as threats go, that's about as tame a threat as not wishing very severe violence. But at the same time, I think it's important to point it out. If you're going to do the honor system, if you're going to strongly encourage it, then you do have to kind of keep calling it out when it happens and hope that the peer pressure of the people around them will kind of work rather than having to go the lockup method. Because I think there are some liability risks when you're asking somebody to turn their phone over and put it in a bag or whatever it may be, put it in a locker. This is just a way of saying, please don't. We're not gonna make you, but at the same time, this way we don't have to be responsible for something happening to your phone while you're at the concert.
And you'll be less likely to run into people who just refuse to go because they don't like the idea of turning their phone over to somebody else. I can totally understand that. I mean, his message came kind of at the end of what was a pretty long thank you to all the fans. So to me, it's kind of a non-story in that, like, I get people are reporting it, but it's not like he was calling for their heads or anything of that nature. I think kind of the more interesting thing is the set list on the tour. There's been a lot of kind of mixed feelings about the set list. I guess they've been really focusing on kind of the albums between 1980 and 1992, which is understandable given that was ultimately kind of their height, and 92 was kind of the end of the Bruce Dickinson run. But to me, I don't blame them for kind of focusing on that. People are kind of upset because there aren't any songs off of 1990's No Prayer for the Dying, which, from what I can tell, kind of the only real big hit from that album was Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. So as far as their hits go, if there was one that you were going to leave off, I'm probably not going to lose a whole lot of sleep on that.
Sure.
They are playing tracks like Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, Wrathchild, Phantom of the Opera, so I think that's really cool. If I was going to add anything to the set list that I saw that they didn't play, it would be something like Be Quick or Be Dead, Can I Play with Madness? And while it's kind of outside of the classic year scope, it's more near the end of the 90s, I would like to see Wicker Man live. I think that would be really cool. But you're never going to see a band like an Iron Maiden or a Metallica and see all the songs you want to see. It's just not feasible.
No, because even if you go like in a festival setting where like Metallica's playing 2 nights and they're not doing repeats, they have so many hits that there's no chance that you're going to see that one song that you want to hear from them. Like, they just can't do them all. And the same thing with Iron Maiden. And they're still one of the bands that's on that list that I would really like to see live because I've always admired Bruce Dickinson and the way he continues to sing at his age now.
It's amazing.
Considering the register, the octave that he sings a lot of those songs at, and the fact that he can still belt it out. Yeah, it's just incredible. And, I think overall, I think it's tough when you're putting together these set lists because you do want to try to include something from every generation. But at the same time, like you said, there is kind of a window that makes the most sense. And you're going to hit that pretty heavily, when you maybe aren't touring as much as you used to tour.
Yeah.
So that there's at least a big chunk of hits in that era that people are going to want to see. So you do the best you can, and you hope you don't leave a ton of them off. And you hope it's a case where, if you do leave 1 or 2 off, maybe it's people kind of, oh, well, it's all right. Like we can get over the fact that's not on there.
I think you at least want the fans to leave with I didn't hear this song, but I did get this one. You always want that, like, maybe I didn't get this song I wanted to hear, but they did play this one and this one that I haven't heard in a while that are great songs. Like, you always want to feel like you're getting something special if maybe you're not getting that one particular hit you wanted to hear.
Yeah, for sure. So, definitely a band I want to check out. Definitely encourage you all listening to check them out if you have not done so already. But definitely uh, interested to see how their tour continues. And the phone policy thing is kind of always one of those interesting things. And sounds like overall their fans are doing a really good job with it. And hopefully that's something that becomes a trend, not just in bands that are asking people to do it, but also just in general at these concert events. But that wraps up our news headlines for today. Reminder, check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. We will be back next Sunday night for another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. It'll be May 16th music, and then tentatively the day after, Monday, we will be back with our news podcast, the Nerdcast News Report. It will make its triumphant return. I believe it'll be Mondays and Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, but we will let you know for sure. But that will start a week from Monday. So after our next episode of the Hard Rock Empire, we'll get back to our daily news headlines. We got plenty of news to talk about because we haven't done that in a few weeks, but we'll be back and rolling along once again. It is time, though, to get to our new music for the week. And, of course, as I always talk about at this time, we'll tell you how we get to this point. Mike will go through and he will pull all of the new albums for a given date off of a couple different sources. The date in question this time is May the 9th. And then we'll pull a track off of each of those albums and put them in a YouTube playlist. That playlist is being shared as we speak in the chat. And once that is accomplished, at that point, then we go through and listen to the music. Mike listens to all of it. I listen to the best of the ones that Mike has kind of picked out. And we choose 2 new albums each to spotlight on this podcast. And this is, we mentioned last episode it kind of being a little bit thinner than the week before. And this one, I feel like might have been a little bit thinner than than last week's was. But again, some interesting stuff out there, some unique stuff, which is kind of interesting. And it was interesting, and definitely encourage you to check out the playlist because you might find some things on there that maybe didn't necessarily reverberate with us, but they might with you. So definitely encourage you to do that. And then one other thing I always try to remember to mention, if you're listening on the podcast version of this, which right now our podcast version's a couple episodes behind because they're in the process of kind of switching over our podcast network. You'll still find it on YouTube, Spotify, maybe a little slow for the next couple weeks, but eventually we'll get those back to where they're uploading night of as we've done before. But if you're listening on those sources, we won't have the music clips. The best place to hear the music clips is live with us on YouTube or Twitch. The next best place is on the VOD on YouTube or Twitch, but beyond that, we won't have the music clips if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. But with all that out of the way, it is time to get to the music of May the 9th. And Mike, you have a couple very interesting picks this week, and definitely interested to hear what you have to say about them. So let's get started with your first pick. Actually, before we get to your first pick, there were a couple of big acts that had albums this week. One in particular that we know did really well was an album that actually went all the way to number 1. It was we tend to stay away from like the big charting albums, but I think it's one that's worth mentioning.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to listen to the entire Sleep Token album yet. I don't want to say I don't like modern metal, but that's not at the forefront of my listening. The track I have heard was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure overall the album is fine. It's something I probably need to give a better listen to just to kind of get acquainted with their sound more than I currently am. But yeah, that was definitely the big one. And certainly excited anytime a metal act can reach number 1. I did finally listen to the Ghost album from a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
And that's actually really catchy, typical Ghost stuff.
Good.
Definitely one I need to pick up still. But yeah, I listened to it on the way to class last week and definitely impressed with it.
Nice. That's one I definitely want to listen to front to back, and we'll get the chance to do that. But having said that, we've got that out of the way. It is time to get to your picks for this week. So what do you have for pick number 1?
Yeah, so for pick 1, I'm kind of sticking to my wheelhouse more or less. This is the debut album from a Louisiana-based thrash metal band. Album originally came out on their Bandcamp in 2023, but since then it looks like they've been picked up by Shadow Kingdom Records, and the album is getting a re-release. The band in question is Void, and their debut album is Horrors of Reality.
Yeah, when I saw that this is not unusual. We have seen this a few times where bands are getting signed to labels and they re-release something. But I think it's a great way to get something out in front of more people than it might have been a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the write-up on Shadow Kingdom Records, they mentioned kind of right off the bat, while many bands have utilized the moniker Void, none of them have hailed from Lafayette, Louisiana, and none of them have had such a powerful sound as this one. And it's funny, if you go to the Metal Archives and you pull up the band's page, kind of under the additional notes, it's like, not to be confused with Void, death black doom metal from Kansas City, Missouri. Void, extreme progressive metal / electronic from Las Vegas, Nevada. Void, industrial experimental black metal from Glen Gardner, New Jersey. Void, thrash metal from Yuba City, California. Void, hardcore punk from Columbia, Maryland, active 1979 to 1984. Void, black and doom drone metal from Boston, Massachusetts. And Victims of Internal Decay, death metal from Albany, Oregon, also known as Void. So yeah, it's none of those bands. This is instead the Lafayette, Louisiana-based thrash band that's been active since 2019. So make sure you're getting the right Void.
Yeah, I'm very grateful they had an Encyclopedia Metallum page because they also have links to their social media. So I was able to find the right Facebook page to tag these guys and not one of the 18 other Void bands.
I mean, why wouldn't you want to name your band Void? It's a great name.
It's a great name.
So these guys, per the Metal Archives, the band consists of Aaron Landry on drums, Gabe Lejeune on guitars, Jackson Davenport on vocals, Blake Adams on bass, and Chris Braun on guitars. But yeah, talking about these guys, they formed, according to the Metal Archives, in 2019. They released a couple singles in 2021, and then 2023 they released Horrors of Reality on their Bandcamp. It lists their influences as early Metallica, Merciful Fate, Annihilator, and some more cult-like acts like Toxic, Power Mad, and Realm. The website mentions when you listen to the album, you'd swear it was 1989 again. I think that's fair. They definitely have an early thrash speed sound going on where the vocals kind of bridge that gap between metal and punk. I mean, if it feels dated, that's, I think, simply because we've been conditioned to think that music like this doesn't get made anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think it doesn't. It's more how you interact with it that makes you think it's dated. To me, I think it's great that there are bands out there that are creating the sound. And I think, at least once a week on this show, we find some new traditional thrash, new wave of kind of British heavy metal inspired or speed metal inspired band out there doing it. And I think it's great to find more of them. It's not a bad thing at all. If you enjoy this album, they've released 3 singles since this is an album that came out a couple years ago. Those singles are Silent Onslaught, Return of the Phantom, and Apparition, all really cool. Standout tracks on the album. It's a 10-track album, 40 minutes long. There's really no weak links here, but I would go with First In, Last Out, Feeding Frenzy, Voodoo, Lazarus, and the track that I picked to listen to, the song Mirror Maze.
Let's check these guys out. This is Void from Lafayette, Louisiana. This is a re-released album from 2023, Horrors of Reality. This is the 9th track off of that album, Mirror Maze. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Your expressions change, echo through the crowd. When I run, they're coming fast. Stare into your gaze, in this trap, mirror maze. Feeling it in days, as your past leads you astray. You'll forever stay in this trap, mirror maze. The reflections change, as your mind breaks through the Yeah, I definitely see the thought process behind saying this sounds like it's from the 1980s.
Yeah.
But again, I think there's no reason why there shouldn't be more bands out there doing this type of music. We've covered a slew of bands that try to sound like Journey from 1985, and we've even kind of more recently come across bands trying to sound like 70s bands. I think like that feels like a kind of a new development. But we have found some really great new thrash metal bands that are out there, and I think if you're a fan of old school thrash, I think it should be very encouraging to you that there are bands out there that not only were inspired by that era of music, but want to keep that era of music alive and not just say, well, that's a dated thing that's only from the 1980s. And these guys really did a really good job of kind of carrying that spirit of thrash with them.
Yeah, I think we're all going to face a difficult decision in the coming years where what would you rather do? Would you rather go and watch the hologram version of your favorite band from 1980? Or would you rather go check out a new band that's playing music inspired by that rocks really hard and are really there in person? And to me, I would much rather pay the money to see the brand new band, knowing that that's going to keep that music alive, whereas the holograms aren't going to write new albums.
Well, I hope not.
I mean, I guess it's possible, but they won't necessarily be doing the writing. Some
Correct.
AI will be doing it for them. But to me, I think you have a new crop of bands constantly coming around. Why not jump in on that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And these guys, like I said, really have done it well. And it's an era that I think is still underrepresented in modern music, and it's always exciting to find a new entry into that space. So check those guys out. Void, again, newly signed to a label. This is a re-release, but I know there were a lot of people on their Facebook page when I was scrolling through asking, like, hey, when's the new album going to drop? So their fan base is already, like, psyched up that maybe we got a new album coming. So who knows? Maybe we'll get some new Void sometime before the end of 2025.
Kind of sounds that way. I mean, they do have those newer singles that have come out. I assume they will also play a part in what the subsequent album's going to be. And yeah, I mean, check out the website. They have vinyl that you can purchase, really cool stuff that comes along with that. It's always cool to support these bands.
Yeah, for sure. So check out Void, Lafayette, Louisiana. I mean, check out any of the Voids, but specifically in this case, the one from Lafayette, Louisiana, playing some great thrash metal. And Mike's first pick for this week. As always, you have two picks, and definitely feels like a little bit of a change in vibe for pick number 2 compared to pick number 1. What do you have for pick number 2?
Yeah, so, I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about new bands that are creating sounds that maybe harken back to another period of time, like my last one with kind of 80s thrash. We get a lot of AOR stuff, a lot of arena rock type sounds. We don't always highlight a lot of bands that are celebrating kind of that new metal era, and I think these guys are definitely doing that. This is the third full-length studio album from this band from Atlanta, Georgia. They are listed as a metalcore/new metal band. They are Tetrarch, and the album is The Ugly Side of Me.
Speaking of Atlanta, I'll be making my first ever trip to Atlanta this
Say hi
week.
to them while you're
Oh
down
yeah,
there?
if I see them in somewhere downtown at a mortgage professionals convention,
Entirely possible.
maybe they're playing one of the nights. I don't know, but
That'd be cool.
Definitely interested to hear more about these guys.
Yeah, so these guys go back all the way to 2007. They're currently made up of the founders, Josh Four and Diamond Rowe, lead vocals, rhythm guitar, and lead guitar backing vocals, respectively, as well as Ryan Lerner on bass and backing vocals, and Ruben Lemus on drums and percussion. I was listening to this album. I was trying to think, like, I really enjoy this. I'm not a big modern metal guy. We've talked about that ad nauseum. But there's just something about it that still feels really good. And I was reading Katarina McGinn's review on the Dead Rhetoric site. And, she points out that Tetrarch's able to make, like, new metal influences, take those and basically, in a way, use those to make this more modern metal sound more accessible. And I think that's kind of how I felt about it. As someone who's more of a metal fan, it felt familiar. And yeah, there are some modern metal elements, but it's still, to me, you could draw the line to Korn or Edema or Linkin Park while listening to this. And, as many times as I listen to bands who were influenced by early Metallica and Merciful Fate and Megadeth and Annihilator, this, to me, felt like, okay, remember those really huge bands in the late 90s and early 2000s? These guys were influenced by them, but are doing it in more of a metal way, and I think I'm on board with that. We need we need positive examples of new metal in this current millennium, just as I have my other influences resurfacing as well. Like my first pick, this is a 10-track album. It's only 32 minutes long, and if you had any passing interest in any kind of new metal bands, you're gonna enjoy this. Like it's heavy, but very much in that new metal vein. Standout tracks include Anything Like Myself, Never Again, Erase, The Only Thing I've Got, The Ugly Side of Me, and the track that I picked to listen to, the song Cold.
Check these guys out. This is Tetrarch from Atlanta, Georgia. This is their new album, The Ugly Side of Me. And this is track number 8 off of that album. It is Cold. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, I was trying to think if there was like a comparison band. Like, there's a little bit of like Avenged Sevenfold vibes there.
Yeah.
Kind of in the verse more than the chorus. But there's not really a one-for-one direct comparison to those bands. It does feel like a style, but it does feel like they've kind of carved out their own niche there, which is really kind of cool.
And it sounds like their earlier stuff was more kind of on the metalcore side, and they've kind of slowly shifted more toward like a new metal thing. Either way, it sounds good. It works, so I'm here for it.
Yeah, for sure, and definitely interested in getting to hear a little more of this album. But like Mike said, definitely a kind of music that maybe sometimes gets left out in new modern bands. But definitely check those guys out. Tetrarch, really cool sound from them. I have 2 picks as well this week, and I was just, while Mike was making his second pick, I was verifying the pronunciation of this band, and I've been pronouncing it wrong for 3 days, so we're going to get it right. This first band is an English progressive metal band formed in 2007. They are Haken, and their new album is Live Forms, An Evening with Haken. I checked their Wikipedia page, and of course, it gave me a pronunciation, and that is how it is pronounced. So this is a live album / live DVD, Blu-ray release that these guys are doing. These guys were formed in 2007 in London, England. They're made up of Ross Jennings on vocals, Richard Henshaw on guitars, keyboards, and backing vocals, Charlie Griffiths on guitars and backing vocals, Raymond Hearn on drums and backing vocals, Peter Jones on keyboards and backing vocals, and Connor Green on bass guitar and backing vocals. These guys have been around a while. As we mentioned, they've released 7 studio albums, 2 EPs, and now 2 live albums. Really, really well thought of progressive rock band. This was mostly recorded from a concert at the O2 Forum, Kentish Town in London on September 21st, 2024. If you are a fan of Haken, you're going to note that there is a complete playthrough of the album Fauna as part of this collection. However, they do have tracks from all of their albums on this. This is lengthy. When I opened this up, I did not realize it was going to be 2 hours and 47 minutes of live music. I have not gotten through the whole thing, admittedly, but what I have heard is certainly good enough to earn a spot on our picks this week. Was not really familiar with these guys other than having heard of them, but really came away impressed listening to what I got to listen to off this album. Definitely want to check out their studio albums as well. But as far as a live album goes, like everybody involved clearly did good work. I mean, obviously it's well played, well sang, but also well mixed. If you didn't know, if they didn't have the little crowd bits at the beginning and the end, you could easily think this is a studio release, and it would be totally understandable. But really, really good stuff from them. Standout tracks, again, pack your lunch. You're going to be there a while because it's very lengthy. But the ones I got to listen to included Taurus, Nightingale, Sempiternal Beings, and the song we're going to listen to on the podcast is Beneath the White Rainbow. So let's check these guys out. This is Haken with their new release, Live Forms, An Evening with Haken. This is the 6th track out of 21 on this release. This is Beneath the White Rainbow. So let's listen to a little bit of that now. Make no mistake, this is progressive.
Yeah.
Progressive rock. Definitely will not be confused by that when you listen to these guys. But I've really, like I said, blown away by these guys. Definitely excited to go back and listen to some studio stuff from them. But Mike, your thoughts on Haken?
Yeah, they're a band who has had their name come up numerous times as we've done this, as has Richard Henschel as well. So I knew they were a big deal, that he's a big deal. Definitely something I need to sit down and actually commit some time to getting into, because given my interest in progressive metal, I'm certain I would enjoy it. It's just a matter of actually getting down and digging into it, which I definitely need to do.
Yeah, and this was one of those weeks where, like I said, I felt like there were a lot of albums this week that had a couple good tracks here and there, but maybe the whole thing wasn't great. So it was one of those weeks where picking something like this kind of made sense. Almost picked a completely instrumental album as well, because that was really good too. But definitely wanted to give Haken a shout, and definitely going to check these guys out more going forward, and encourage you to do the same. I have 2 picks as well. We are headed to Denmark for this second pick. This is a Danish metal band, and their name is Statement with Sinister Thing. We talk about different styles of music as we go through here. And, Statement's an interesting band because it feels like, they started off a little more of a melodic rock band, but clearly had a mission on this album to kind of, roughen up their sound a bit. And I think they've successfully done that. This is their 5th album. Band members include Yannick Brockdorf on vocals, Niels Alex Larsen on lead guitars and backing vocals, Lars Ulrich Lefevre on guitars, backing vocals, Martin Poulsen on bass, and Daniel Nielsen on drums. Like I said, the goal was to go a little bit harder, and I think they've done that. There were also some parts on this album where, you kind of got that Channing vibe where you can just imagine these guys in front of a stadium crowd trying to get the crowd to kind of chant along with them. I think that's another good way to kind of rough your album up. But I think if you're a fan of their earlier stuff that's melodic, there's still enough of that there that you're not going to feel like you're completely abandoned by what these guys have done with this album. One review called it safe heavy. I think that's fair. They clearly wanted it to have more of an edge, and I think they did that without really kind of selling out onto what they've done so far. But a really enjoyable listen beginning to end. Standout tracks include The World is Fading, Set My Anger Free, The Last Goodbye, and the title track is the one we're going to listen to on the podcast, Sinister Thing. So let's check these guys out. This is Statement with Sinister Thing, and this is the opening track and the title track to this album, Sinister Thing. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. And I think that opening track is probably one of the more melodic tracks on the album. There are some that are definitely harsher, and if you're more of a fan of going that direction, I think you will find some things on this album that you'll like, but overall, it was a really solid listen. So kudos to Statement for making one, I guess, with this album. Mike, your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, I mean, whether that's safe heavy or not, it still sounds really good. So I see no problem with it. I, I still got to ask about the guitarist, Lars Ulrich Lefevre. Like, is that really his name? Like, did they just add the Ulrich to it just for humor value? Because that's just a weird coincidence.
Sure. Not spelled the same, but
no,
still.
not spelled the same. But when you see it, you hear someone say it, you're just like, ha. But yeah, I mean, they got a good sound. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I really was impressed by it, and excited to get to hear more from these guys, and interested to maybe go back and listen to those first 4 albums, kind of see where their sound has evolved over the years. But definitely check those guys out. Statement, my second pick for this week. That's going to wrap up our new music for this week. It is time to head into the vault, where Mike and I will each give you a classic album you need to check out. Mike is, as we've mentioned every week, literally going through his vault letter by letter, and as of this week has reached the halfway point of another trip through the alphabet. We are up to the letter M, and again, I'm sure a letter that has a lot of really great options, but you went with a pretty logical pick. Tell us about your pick in the vault.
Yeah, this is one I've kind of wanted to talk about for a while. It's just kind of a hidden gem to some degree, maybe, but just one that I've enjoyed for years. Letter M, obviously a lot of choices, but the one I ended up going with was the first and only album from Dave Mustaine's side project group. It is MD.45 and their 1996 offering, The Craving.
This is one that's been a while since I listened to this, but it's definitely worth a mention for sure. It's a good album.
Yeah, this was released on July 23rd, 1996 via a subsidiary of their then label Capitol Records. The band consisted of Lee Ving on vocals and harmonica, Dave Mustaine on guitar, Kelly Lemieux on bass. He is from Goldfinger and also worked with Paul Gilbert over the years. And on drums, Jimmy DeGrasso, who has been with everybody.
I was going to say, I think we talk about him somewhat regularly as well.
Yeah, we're talking former Ozzy, Y&T, White Lion, Suicidal Tendencies, and probably more notably here, eventually he would become the drummer of Megadeth. So, how about that? Yeah, I remember discovering this album as I was kind of getting deeper into the Megadeth catalog, as I was kind of learning to get into that band in the 90s. And yeah, this album had kind of that signature Dave Mustaine guitar riffs and sounds, but the vocals were what really kind of separated it for me. Having no knowledge of punk music at the time, when I saw Lee Ving's name, like the only thing I really thought is that's the dude from Clue.
Yeah.
Like he played Mr. Body in the movie Clue, which is a tremendous movie for the record.
For sure.
It wasn't until later when I saw the movie SLC Punk that I got my first taste of his band Fear and their 1978 song I Love Living in the City. Just, if you're into punk music, it's a great song. It fit the movie perfectly well, obviously. Turns out that song was also later used on the games Tony Hawk's Underground 2 and The Warriors. Kind of weird story about this one is, along with the rest or the bulk of Megadeth's catalog in 2004, this one got a remaster. And when it did, Lee Ving's vocals just happened to not be there anymore, and they were replaced by Dave Mustaine singing.
How about that?
At the time, I could have sworn that they said they couldn't find the masters for his vocals, and that's why they disappeared. But on Wikipedia, they even just straight out said that Dave decided to re-record the vocals, thinking it might make the album a little more appealing to Megadeth fans. Which,
Fair.
Sure, maybe. I think I can see that line of thinking, but I also feel like it took away what kind of made this special. Like, the songs on this album should have been sung by a punk singer, not Dave Mustaine.
Yeah.
I love Dave's studio vocals, especially, early 2000s, he was still sounding pretty good, but you can't really replace Lee Ving, whether you like his voice or hate it. It's unique. This is also an album that, over the years with my ever-growing CD collection, I somehow lost it. I don't have the original version of MD.45 anymore until I actually just went onto eBay and purchased a copy of it. I have the remaster, but like I mentioned, that's just not quite the same. So I will finally reacquire the original MD.45, so I'm excited about that. The album's classic, and for whatever reason, the chorus to Designer Behavior kind of became this, like, almost like a meme to, like, my friend group in the late 90s before that was even a thing, where we would just, for whatever reason, periodically just yell, "Remember Ozzy and Harriet?" which is part of the chorus, which it's such a weird song, but it's so good. I don't know how else to describe it. Standout tracks on the album include Hell's Motel, The Day the Music Died, Designer Behavior, The Creed, Nothing Is Something. Give it a listen. I think if you're someone who at any point in time thought Dave Mustaine should just be a guitarist and there should be someone else singing, here's your chance to kind of hear what that sounds like, and it's wild.
Yeah, and I'm curious. I didn't look, but I was going to look to see what version of the album appears on like the streaming sites, whether you can find like the original version.
I found the original on YouTube. I don't know about elsewhere, or even like kind of like the official release on YouTube Music. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, because I'm sure the remaster is on there, but I'm curious as to whether you can find the original, vocals. It's from what I remember of this album, and like I said, it's been a while since I went back and listened to it. It is good and it is different. And if you're picking this up expecting it to be Megadeth, you'll hear vibes of Megadeth, but it's not Megadeth. Like unless you get the remaster, and then it's closer to Megadeth. But I wonder why more musicians don't do that. I mean, obviously some have. I mean, we've seen examples over the years.
Well, I think the closest comparison would be Metallica and Lou Reed, right?
Yeah.
Metallica with a different lead singer.
Yeah. And, had they picked somebody that wasn't Lou Reed, maybe I would have been into that album. But,
iTunes has the remastered one, unfortunately.
Okay.
So, I mean, the original version might be fairly rare beyond just random people uploading the songs to YouTube.
So, yeah, if you can find a copy of it, probably worth picking it up because who knows how many copies are even out there floating around right now. But, again, I would love to see more acts do this.
Yeah.
And be comfortable enough that you're such a big act that you're not risking your career. I mean, you think of like the one that modern day comes to mind is something like a Slipknot Stone Sour sort of situation where you have kind of two branches of the same tree.
Yeah.
But they're so different. Like the music styles are so different. I think it would be cool if you had a band that was doing X and then they cross over and do Y, and we're not talking like Hootie going to do country music or, something like that. But
you
yeah.
just wonder, like, what did the other guys, what did the Blowfish do at that point in time? Did they move on to a different band? I don't remember hearing about that ever.
I'm waiting for them to bring back Behind the Music so we can find that out.
That would be fantastic.
Honestly, somebody should do that. But yeah, definitely check out MD.45, especially if you're a Megadeth fan. Maybe you're a relatively young Megadeth fan and don't even know that this thing is out there. Be worth your time to check this one out. So that's Mike's Vault pick for this week. As I've mentioned, I'm going through the Frontiers catalogs, all the Frontiers bands, and spending 2 weeks on each letter. 1 week I pick a band, the next week I allow a randomizer to pick a band, then pick an album that Frontiers released. And so we are up to the letter E, and this is the randomizer pick. And we are going to talk about a Swedish hard rock band from Stockholm. This is Eclipse, and the album we are going to be talking about is Are You Ready to Rock? We have talked about these guys on the podcast before. They had a new album back in 2024. It was really good. No big surprise there. This band was formed in 1999. Current members are Eric Martinson on vocals, guitar, and bass, Magnus Henriksson on guitars, Philip Krusner on drums, and Victor Krusner on bass. This album was released in 2008. Eric Martinson basically wrote this stuff for his side project, Wet, which we've also talked about on this podcast. And, of course, Wet is consisting of Work of Art, the W, Eclipse, this band, and Talisman. So, that's where that name comes from. But instead of recording it with the side project, he decided to record it with Eclipse instead. And, it's a little bit on the harder edge of the melodic spectrum, but it's a melodic rock at its very best. And this album is really, really good. It was kind of like right before this band started getting some hits in Europe. This was kind of the album before that. So I was kind of interested to see, what they were kind of leading up to. But as is the case with so many of these Frontiers bands that we go back and listen to the old stuff, it's so good. If you're a fan of melodic rock, if you're a fan of anything Eric Martinson's involved in, you probably already have heard this album, but if you haven't, it's definitely worth checking out. There was a re-release of this as well in 2014, I believe it was. So probably a little more readily available, but definitely worth checking out. Standout tracks, the whole album was great. But if I had to pick some, Breaking My Heart Again, To Mend a Broken Heart, Wild One, and Hard Time Loving You. That's not much else I can say about these guys except they were great. And, the album we listened to last year was great. And I'm anxious to go back and listen to more of these guys' stuff.
Yeah, they're definitely an obvious choice of bands that I got to late. Like Megalomanium 2 from last year was an awesome album. And then to look at their studio album list, their discography, and see just how many albums they have, it's like, man, my work is cut out for me because at some point I need to go back and revisit all of that or visit it for the first time, I suppose. But yeah, it seems like they've kind of been one of the big front runners of that melodic hard rock resurgence that we now see so many bands, especially in Sweden, with that sound. These guys were probably kind of doing it before it was cool again.
Yeah, 100%. And again, like you said, when you see all the albums they've released, it's like, man, I want to go through and listen to all these. And just a really talented group, and kind of excited to get to listen to some old stuff, which obviously is the point of this whole vault exercise.
Yeah.
Is to listen to old Frontier stuff that maybe certainly in a lot of cases we were not listening to these bands at that time. So definitely check out Eclipse. Are you ready to rock? That is the pick for this week.
You better be.
You better be ready to rock. It is time for the Power Trio, your weekly hard rock hat trick, where we bring up a question and we look for your answers and we get our answers from our esteemed panel. And I'll be honest, this is one of those weeks where it's just been really busy and I didn't come up with a good topic, so I threw it out there in the Discord. Mike immediately came in and said, let's do the top rock or metal songs from movie soundtracks, and that just opened the floodgates of songs that pop into your head. In fact, while we were just talking about Eclipse, I thought of another song that I put on my list. I tried to make my list a little lengthier than a hat trick, just in case there would be some overlap. But we'll see. I'm really interested. Chris has put his picks out there. Let's start with his first, because I don't think I've overlapped with anything he's got, but then we'll get to Shane and you and me. But let's start with what Chris has for his soundtrack picks.
Yeah, so for Chris's picks, number 1, we have Angel Dust by Bender, and that is off the soundtrack to the movie 3,000 Miles to Graceland. I remember that being a fairly popular movie way back in my early Blockbuster days. I've not heard the song nor the soundtrack, but, it's Chris. It's a soundtrack. That's, something he knows a lot about. So
he's a movie guy for sure. Yeah. And I had no idea that the robot from Futurama had a hit song. So
who knew?
Really cool.
Number 2, we are moving on to the song Too Much of a Good Thing by the Suns off the Dumb and Dumber soundtrack. It's been so long since I've seen Dumb and Dumber. Why don't I know what that song is?
I don't know off the top of my head either.
And that's interesting. I mean, great movie. Probably one of Jim Carrey's best.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't remember that song.
I'll have to go back and check it out.
Exactly. Number 3, one that I am a little more familiar with, we have Can't You Trip Like I Do, mashup courtesy of the Crystal Method and Filter off of the Spawn motion picture soundtrack. This kind of brings me to a point I was going to make during my list, and that's, man, there were just a lot of really awesome soundtracks there for a period of time. Let's check the Spawn soundtrack out. That was from 1997. What the heck? Why isn't? Yeah, I mean, you got that. You got Long Hard Road Out of Hell, Marilyn Manson and Sneaker Pimps. You got Korn, Butthole Surfers. Kind of a remix, Metallica and DJ Spooky with For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot of collaborations on that soundtrack, but interesting stuff and a lot of huge names. But there were just so many great soundtracks in the late 90s and early 2000s. You could basically just confine the power trio to that range and come up with so many great songs.
For sure. And I tried to stay away generally from that era because I knew that would be popular picks because there are some strong ones. I did a little farther down my list put a movie from that, but I don't know if that one will make it to there or not.
I feel like anytime I strayed too far from that, I landed on something that I'm like, okay, I know someone else is going to pick that.
Yeah.
With one exception, and that one exception happens to be the soundtrack overlap that Shane and I have.
Well, let's talk about Shane's list. I'm very interested because I just like I said, I have 6 on the list and one in my head that's a bonus pick that just popped in there. I'm curious to see how many of those 6 actually get picked before I get a chance to talk about it. But let's get to Shane.
Okay, so for Shane's 3, number 1, he has The Touch by Stan Bush from Transformers the Movie, original motion picture soundtrack from 1986.
I put that low on my list because I knew somebody was going to pick that, so I was not counting on that getting through.
That is, in fact, the album overlap that he and I share. His number 2 is any song off the Crow soundtrack. So, not super familiar with the Crow soundtrack. We do have Big Empty from Stone Temple Pilots on it.
Oh, okay.
Great song. Dead Souls, Nine Inch Nails, Ghost Rider, Rollins Band, Milquetoast by Helmet, and The Badge by Pantera. So,
it's a pretty solid soundtrack.
Again, 90s and 2000s just had some really strong soundtracks, and that is no exception. Number 3, he actually, and I don't remember when I texted him if I prefaced it by saying metal and rock. I don't think I did. So he did kind of veer off the typical path, but I think he picked one of the best soundtrack songs ever that isn't metal or rock. And that is Gangsta's Paradise, Coolio and LV from the movie Dangerous Minds, music from the motion picture from 1995.
I kind of hate myself that I didn't pick that.
Yeah, I feel like if I had thought away from rock, that would have been the first obvious choice. A tremendous song. Not super familiar with anything else on the soundtrack, but it doesn't matter. That's legendary.
That's got to be one of the best hip hop songs of all time.
Yeah.
Like that is the music, the lyrics is just perfect.
It kind of now I almost want to veer off and do like a non-metal and hard rock version of this.
Yeah.
Because you got that. Another one that just popped in my head that's not really metal or rock, Kiss from a Rose, Seal.
See, yeah. And I did veer away from metal and rock because I was afraid that like the big metal and rock ones would be picked. So, but we might do that, a non-metal and rock version as well. Because even though I have a bunch, I'm certain I can come up with more.
Oh, yeah.
So, but let's get to your choices. I have a feeling, I'm guessing I know what the choice off the same soundtrack was, but we'll see.
Yeah, so for number 1, tremendous soundtrack, by the way, and I picked a song that I figured no one else would pick. The song Time Machine from Black Sabbath.
Okay.
From Wayne's World, music from the motion picture from 1992.
Yeah.
Great song. It was also on their 1992 album Dehumanizer. However, it's a different version than what was on the Wayne's World soundtrack. Like, the song is kind of put together a little differently. Both are great. It was kind of Dio's return to Black Sabbath at that point in time. So many great songs from Wayne's World, and that is right up there for me.
Yeah, for sure. Ballroom Blitz immediately comes to mind when you think of Wayne's World. Foxy Lady, even though it's not maybe my favorite song, it's just it's so iconic in the movie that you just immediately think of it. Like that's it. We could go on talking about the Wayne's World soundtrack.
Oh, for sure.
I stayed away from that soundtrack completely because I was sure there would be at least a
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah,
I
obviously,
someone might pick that, so I had to stay away from it
for sure.
So moving on to number 2, this is the overlap. The song Dare by Stan Bush.
There you
from
go.
the Transformers the Movie, the original motion picture soundtrack.
What's interesting is I almost put Dare to Be Stupid, also from the Transformers the Movie, which would have been a third pick from that soundtrack.
See, could have easily picked that. So many great. Lion's version of the Transformers theme is great. Even like the Vince DiCola instrumental pieces for the movie are just outstanding and probably underrated in terms of instrumental pieces for movies in the 80s.
Yeah, wasn't there a song like Nothing's Gonna Stand in My Way or something?
Like there were several bands that played under pseudonyms on it, and I think that was one of them. Let's see here. Because let's see.
If you haven't seen Transformers, the movie from the 80s, the animated motion picture, you have to see that movie. Like, even if you're not a fan of Transformers, the music in that movie alone makes it worth a watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a band that was credited as has it correct on the Wikipedia, which is kind of funny. They were called Spectre General on the soundtrack, but it was actually the Canadian metal band Kick Axe.
Oh, okay.
That did Nothing's Gonna Stand in Our Way and Hunger. Both great songs also. And I don't remember. There's another band called Energy. I don't know if that was a different band or not, but they did Instruments of Destruction. Just top to bottom, a really cool soundtrack for an '80s cartoon.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great soundtrack. You can't go wrong making any pick from that one.
So for number 3, and this kind of goes back to they had some crazy soundtracks in the early 2000s. The song "Bloodline" by the band Slayer from the Dracula 2000 soundtrack. I mean, the soundtrack, you had that, you had Power Man 5000, Disturbed, System of a Down, Pantera, Static X, Saliva. Just a really awesome soundtrack. I remember liking the movie, but I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I remember the soundtrack. The song also appeared on the subsequent Slayer album, God Hates Us All. I think it was a little different, too, than the soundtrack version of Bloodline, but really awesome song.
Yeah, for sure. That's another really great soundtrack.
I had a couple honorable mentions. I don't know if I want to withhold those until we do this topic again, because that's entirely possible. I'll see what you got, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, I'll mention my honorable mentions, because one is not a rock song, but I think it's epic. And then the other one is one that I guarantee as soon as I say it, it's probably on your honorable mention list too. But so we'll stick with the first 3 rock songs I have on the list. How about Dokken and Dream Warriors from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3,
man.
Dream Warriors?
I feel bad for not picking that one out.
That was the first one that popped into my head. Just a classic Dokken song.
Dokken was so good.
Yeah, for sure. If you don't know that song, you have to go listen to it immediately. How about from the movie Highlander, Queen's Princes of the Universe?
Tremendous.
Another just great soundtrack song.
Even used it on the TV series for Highlander, which is kind of where I found out about it initially. But yeah, just like if you only know it from like the Highlander TV series intro, you don't know the song because it just goes off in a totally different direction.
It does.
But yeah, tremendous song.
And then let's wrap up the rock choices with from the movie Back to the Future, Huey Lewis and the News, The Power of Love.
I almost picked that one.
Yeah, because there's several off of that soundtrack as well that you could go with. But I just went. I didn't think it would get to this point without that being mentioned, so I just well, I'll throw it on here. The other 2, one is a rock song, the other one is not. Let's go with the one that's not, because I think this is just one of those classic ones. Linda Ronstadt and James Ingram, Somewhere Out There from American Tail. Just a classic ballad. Another one that popped into my head, since we're mentioning American Tail, it made me think of the other one. Billy Joel and Why Should I Worry from Oliver and Company.
There were a lot of great either like Don Bluth films or Disney film soundtrack songs in the 80s. It was stupid.
And then the other one, which I would think Marley made your honorable mention list, from the movie Spider-Man 2002, Hero from Nickelback featuring Josie Scott.
You know, I avoided that one amazingly enough. But I kind of felt like you could only pick so many that were like kind of in that classification.
Yeah.
And the one I went with was the song What If from Creed.
Oh, yeah.
From Scream 3 soundtrack. I figure if you're going to have Creed on there, you can't also then have Chad Kroeger or Josie Scott. Like,
sure.
they cancel each other out somehow. But, yeah.
I'm not saying it's a great song, but it is an epic song.
As far as soundtrack songs go, I don't know if there are that many better than that. It's just... And I feel like in a lot of ways, I mean, the X-Men movie was fine back then, but to me, like, that first Spider-Man is what really reminded people, man, superhero movies, when done right, can be awesome.
Yeah, it really kind of felt like one of the movies that kind of really jump-started what was going to happen over the next...
And Tobey Maguire is a great Spider-Man.
Oh, for sure. That may be one of the last superhero movies I watched was the 2002 Spider-Man. If we're going to be real about this, it was really good. But...
The other one on my honorable mentions, I mentioned What If by Creed. The other one, Nothing But Flowers, Talking Heads.
Yeah.
Clerks 2.
That one crossed my mind as well. In fact, I think that crossed my mind for a different reason. So, I won't mention what that is. We'll save that for a potential future topic on the Power Trio.
I was looking at the track list of that soundtrack, and 1979 isn't on the soundtrack.
Which is weird because that would have been the one I would have probably chosen.
I feel like both of them are perfect for soundtrack songs. Like when you watch Clerks 2, and I don't know if it's like a lived experience or age thing where that movie just has a certain ability to hit you differently, maybe.
Yeah.
But those songs too, like the weird kind of like melancholic nostalgia that those two songs can generate, well done. I don't know what else to say. That just accented the movie perfectly.
And we won't get too far down the rabbit hole because we could talk about this for a while, but I just think of the soundtrack from the original Clerks and how obviously low budget, the shoestring budget he had at the time, but everything was kind of rock and kind of mostly more upbeat, and it was like punk, and it was fight the man, and kind of that vibe. And then, like you said, in Clerks 2, it's like these guys are still in this rut in their life all these years later, and so you have this like wistful nostalgia of where things might have gone wrong or what might have been, and it does because I mean, I don't remember what year Clerks 2 came out, but I feel like at that time specifically, like maybe I wasn't where I wanted to be in life. And
I'd say probably like 2007 or something
yeah,
like that.
well, that was 100% the case then. And
2006.
Yeah, so I think, that adds to that as well. It's hard to believe that movie's almost going to be 20 years old. That is somewhat depressing, but
yeah.
And
obviously that's got other great tracks too. I mean, King Diamond, obviously.
Obviously, that really should be the pick.
Double dose of King Diamond. You can't go wrong with that. Jackson 5.
Yeah.
Soul Asylum, Misery.
That's
great tune.
Great tune. And another one that's kind of that, just melancholy, depressive type song. It's a great song. Yeah, this was a fun topic, and it was kind of a last-minute topic, and I am sure we are going to revisit this topic again.
You could do an entire episode, just come up with 10 soundtrack songs each and just go to town with it.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's so much great music from soundtracks, and please let us know what your picks are. First off, join the Discord, which I forgot to post a link for, and I'll have to do that later on because I don't think it'll let me pull the link up while we are live. Let's see if it'll let me pull the link up while we're live. We'll see if it actually lets me do that. But if you can, join the Discord and tell us, what your picks are. So we would definitely want to hear other people's opinions on this. And yes, it will actually let me post the links. How about that? So that is in the chat on both sides now. So join the Discord and let us know what your picks are. Comment on the YouTube video, the VOD that'll be up later tonight. Let us know what your favorite soundtrack songs are, rock, metal, or otherwise. Even if they're not rock and metal, definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. But this was a good topic, and like I said, one that'll definitely go down as one we'll come back to in some shape or form in future episodes. But with that said, it is time to bring this week's episode of the Hard Rock Empire to a close. We appreciate you joining us once again for another week of the best hard rock and heavy metal. A reminder, we'll be back with you again 1 week from tonight. That will be on Sunday, June the 8th. It'll be the music of May the 16th. Looking forward to diving into that music this week, and we'll bring you our choices for the best rock and metal releases coming up next week. And then the day after that, which will be June the 9th, we'll be back with our news podcast, the Nerdcast News Report, and it will be coming your way at 7 p.m. Eastern Time in the evening. So we're looking forward to getting caught back up on that, and we'll probably be talking things about Switch 2 because that'll be rolling our way coming up around then as well. So make sure you join us for that. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Join our Discord. We really appreciate that. Thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support. Big thanks to Chris. Big thanks to Mike, as always. Big thanks to Shane for chiming in as well. And a big thanks to you for listening whenever and wherever you may be listening. We'll be back again next week. Until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.